Hi, I'm Doug with Countryside Co-op. We get a lot of calls all throughout the year, not just the summertime, but a lot more during the summertime, of new homeowners that just moved to the country from the city that have had natural gas all their life and never had a propane tank. So today I'd like to kind of touch base and that stuff on things to look for and things that you can recognize once you get there, once you see the video, needless to say. So this propane tank, needless to say, pretty basic. It's a 500-gallon tank. This is what is at probably 95% of most residents that we have. I'll lift the dome here. This is where everything takes place, pretty much is under the dome. This is your service valve. The service valve is a very important part of your tank. Service valve takes and shuts on and off all your gas flow. So anything that flows from the tank to the house, to a garage, to a shop, to whatever else it may flow to, all starts here at the tank at the service valve. So needless to say, if you have an issue at the house and if you smell gas or whatever, come on out to your tank, take and turn it off. It turns off, it's just like a water faucet. You'll be able to see that handle. Then we'll move on to the regulator, which is another very important part. It's your first stage regulator. That regulates the gas down from tank pressure down to about 10 to 12 psi. That runs over to the house. Then it gets knocked down at a second stage, which I will show you in a little bit. This is your first stage regulator. On your first stage regulator, there's dates. There's date codes on there, depending on there's multiple different manufacturers of them, needless to say. But there's date codes, and according to the code and according to insurance companies, they have a 25-year life expectancy. So that's something that, needless to say, when you buy a house, depending on the age of the house, that's something that may need to be replaced. Needless to say, if it's a lease tank, like through Countryside, or whoever the supplier is, needless to say, they are the ones that are responsible typically for the first stage regulator. We'll move on to the other parts of the tank at this point in time. We'll go to the fill valve. This here, very important part also. The fill valve is where we fill liquid propane into the tank. Typically have a plastic cap on them. We just make sure that, needless to say, there's no leaks coming from it, that they have centered back up. When we're done, we do an inspection on them to make sure that there's nothing wrong with it. And if there's a cap that has a crack or an issue, we always replace the cap on it. We'll move on to the relief valve. The relief valve is another important part. It protects the vessel. They have a 250 psi point that if it has reached that stage, it will relieve at 250 psi. Normally never happens, only on occasion if a tank is painted a dark color, which we've had a couple of customers that have painted dark colors. It's more susceptible to relief at that point in time. So pretty important to have a cap over them. If it doesn't, we can take and place a cap over it when we do our inspections and that stuff when we come around to our summer fills. We'll move on to the gauge. This is your gauge. We'll show you a picture of that in just a second here. It has a reading from, needless to say, 0 to 100%. LP tanks cannot be filled to 100% due to its expansion rate. So tanks are filled to 80%, which on a 500-gallon tank gives you 400 gallons of fill capacity at that point in time. If you want to be a will call customer, we want to see you call in between the 25 and 30% range. And that's typically right above the red. Normally it's from 20% down that shows in the red. And we have a lot of people, needless to say, that are kind of panicked if they hit 20%. At 20%, you still have 100 gallons in your tank. So it's not as big a deal as what some might think it is at that point in time. It gives us good ample time in order to get out and take care of getting you filled up. We'll move on to the liquid withdrawal valve. This valve here is only for if we need to switch a tank out. We can take and pull the liquid that's in the tank out, put it into another tank, or put it back into the truck. There's a couple ways of doing that, but this is what that is for. nothing that the customer needs to worry about as far as anything that they need to do or look at on that. We always make sure that we check that on every time we take and fill the tank. That is your basic LP tank. If there's any questions, you can always call our office, needless to say, at 1-800-547-8078 and ask us any questions that you need to. You can actually talk to me. I'm actually the Southern Regional LP Manager. So give us a call if you have any questions when you move into a new home. I'll take and show you what's on the other end of this tank that hooks up to your house, the second stage regulator. This is your second stage regulator. You will say there's also a date code that is stamped or is in the sticker here that we need to verify. There's also a 25-year life expectancy on this. The other thing that we need to look for is if we have a copper line coming up, we need to have a dielectric union installed. On the older style regulators, especially if there's still life left, we will install a dielectric union. The new style regulators that we have out currently, they also have a dielectric union that is built in. If they have a dielectric union on the one that we provide, at that point in time, they have a yellow base. So that way you'll know that it actually has a dielectric. It is a different color from the rest of the regulator. Now this is the customer's responsibility. We provide the one that's on the tank at the first stage, as long as it's a lease tank. If it's a customer owned tank, that is another customer responsibility. That's approximately $65. This here is also, depending on style, it runs from $65 to $85 in order to replace. We don't charge labor in order to replace that regulator. When we find them bad, we replace that at free of charge. As far as labor, the only thing that you have to pay for is the regulator. So that basically wraps up what to look for in your systems. I appreciate you watching. I'm Doug with Countryside.